Alright, so good day everyone. I hope every one of you is doing good. So, our topic for today is planning the risk communication effort and putting risk communication into action, which will be discussed by Group 4. So, at the end of the lesson, we will be able to distinguish the following. First, define the risk communication effort and its importance. Second, illustrate how planning and putting risk communication effort and action works. 3. Determine how development communication helps in uplifting planning risk communication effort and action. 4. Provide strategies, tools, and planning using technology and media in appropriately conducting risk communication. So, to give an introduction, in this topic there are two parts, and the first part is about planning the risk communication effort. This will scope how to determine the objective, how to analyze audience, how to develop messages, what are the appropriate methods, scheduling, and of course, developing a plan. Alright?
Good day, everyone. So, in planning the risk communication effort, let us know first what is risk communication effort. It says here, risk communication efforts attempted to exchange information across the knowledge gap between experts and non-experts. So, simple lang. Ito yung approach in disseminating information on how to deal and manage risk and disaster from the experts into non-experts. So, these non-experts is the public. So, one of the aim of risk communication effort is also to enhance yung usapin about risk and also to guide and improve the management of controversial risk issues. So, next, importance of risk communication effort. It says here, risk communication effort is an important tool for disseminating information and understanding about a risk management decision. So this approach is so important kasi nagkakaroon tayo ng knowledge or information on how to deal and manage risk and disaster in our surrounding. And it also give us an understanding kung bakit napakahalaga na magkaroon tayo ng decision on how to manage risk and disaster. And also, dito sa risk communication effort, kailangan nating pakinggan yung side or yung opinion ng mga stakeholders or the non-experts or the public sa kung kung paano maapektuhan ng desisyon na ito yung interest and values nila. Next, how do we select the best risk communication strategy? So, meron tayong tatlong steps dito. So, first, we assess the risk. Second, gauge risk perception of those at risk or affected. And third, select one of 4 risk communication strategies.
Determine purpose and objective. Purpose and objective. Purpose aim expresses the intention or an aspiration of the research study. It summarizes in a single sentence what you hope to achieve at the end of a research project. So dito, kung gagawa ka ng isang research study, dapat meron ka ng nakalaan na specific na target mo. For example, gusto mong mapag-aralan ng mga farmers kung anong bang kailangan nila, kung ano ba yung hinaing nila, kung ano bang masakit sa kanila. I mean, like sa gastos, abono, yan, fertilizer, ayan. And then second is objectives, outline the specific step that you will take to achieve your research aim. So, yun nga sinabi ko kanina, yung pinaka-specific steps mo. Ang unang gagawin mo or unang nasa tatak sa utak mo, dapat may target ka na agad para ma-achieve mo yung research aim mo. And then, objectives define the what, why, who, when, and how. Question, You should check your objectives regularly during your research project to ensure you are staying focused and decide if you need to review or revise them. So sabi ko nga, mahalaga ang mahalaga tong purpose and objective mo kasi first of all, bago ka naman magkakandak ng isang research o gagawa ng isang research study, dapat kailangan mo kung sino yung target mo, sino ba yung audience mo na yan, kung ano bang specific na ginagawa nila or specific na pinagkakabala nila, like what, di ba? What, ano, ano bang study yan? Who, sino, when, kailan, and how question. Sabi na, kung paano mo mag-create ng isang question about sa study mo. And your aim should be specific and phrased in such a way that it is possible to identify when it has been achieved. So sabi ko na kanina, paulit-ulit na lang tayo sa specific. Dapat specific yung research study mo kagad. Hindi yung paligoy-ligoy ka pa. Para alam mo na yung pag na-achieve mo na, alam mo agad yung research mo. And second one is analyze your audience. Audience analysis involves identifying the audience and adapting a speech to their interests, level of understanding, attitudes, and beliefs. So first of all, if you are conducting an information to the community or one community, you need to identify first the audience or the person, and you need to adjust yourself to understand them. Like for example, level of understanding. So you need to adjust yourself na kunyari ITAS sila. You need to i-adjust mo talaga. Kailangan mong i-adjust talaga yung sarili mo para sa kanila, para mas maintindihan kanila. And then second one is, isa pa dyan is yung attitudes. Kung anong behavior ba sila, dapat wala kang natatapakan din. And then mas talo na din sa dapat makuha mo yung target ng interest nila and then yung beliefs. For example, punta ka sa isang community na lahat halos is mga Muslim. Ikaw na nagdi-discuss ay isang Christian. So, kailangan mo talagang adjust yung sarili mo. Wala ka dapat babanggit na ibang words or dapat centered ka lang. Parang ganun. And then, the second one is taking an audience-centered approach is important because a speaker's effectiveness will be improved if the presentation is created and delivered in an appropriate manner. Siyempre, of course, if the speaker is good and it is effective to their audience, so mas lalo pang gaganda yung pagdi-deliver niyan. Mas lalo kung nasa ayos or tama yung pagka-deliver nito. Mas lalong madami makikinig. And then, identifying the audience through extensive research is often difficult. So, audience adaptation often relies on the healthy use of imagination. So, if you are discussing in the front of them or in the community, you need to discuss it easily, or magbibigay ka ng isang situation or isang problem na kailangan nilang ma-imagine or para gagana yung kanyang imagination na para mas maintindihan nila ito. For example, farmers. Kasama mga farmers. Hindi mo naman ma-explain yung isang bagay kung wala ka namang i-demo. So kahit na i-drawing mo lang siya and then explain mo na siya, gagana yung mga imagination yung mga yan. Kaya sabi mong nag-aral man yan, nagtapos man yan, or hindi sila graduate, undergraduate, once na meron siyang demonstration, maintindihan ng audience mo yan, mas lalo pag ma-explain mo siya ng mas maganda. Parang ganon. Tips for analyzing an audience. Define target audience, research, survey, interview, avoid knowing their privacy or personal information. So, unang-una sa lahat, you need to define first your target audience. Kikilalanin mo talaga sila. And then research, kung gusto mo naman, i-research mo na lang siya para mas madali mong makuha yung isang information about sa kanila. And then survey, magbibigay ka naman ng isang ah, papel or papasagutan mo yung mga tanong mo na nilagay mo sa papel. And then interview, yun na yung tinatawag dito na face to face. Harap-harapan mong i-interview yung isang tao para makuha mo agad-agad yung isang impormasyon. And then avoid knowing their privacy or personal information. Dito mo naman lilimitahan or iiwasan mo yung pagtatanong about sa kanila na baka ma-offend sila or masaktan sila. Kasi pag once na iba yung pagtanong mo sa kanila, baka hindi ka nila sasagutin ng tama.
Develop your message.
Audience analysis involves identifying the audience and adapting a speech to your interest, level of understanding, attitudes, and beliefs. So, dito, kinakailangan mo ng balansing pagbibigay ng information sa mga tao. Hindi ka lamang dapat bumabase sa mga gusto mong malaman nila mula sa'yo. You must understand what they want and need to know and addressing those things in a clear and concise ways. So, when conveying a risk-related information, balance what you need to communicate with your audience. So, for example, use simple and easy to understand words or languages. Don't use jargons and acronyms. And always make sure that your message is easy to recall and understand. You should be straight on the point. So, next is the common pitfalls. So, these are ways of talking which do not advance the conversation and, in fact, make things worse. So, developing messages isn't always as simple as it appears. So, everything starts with the words that are accustomed to the sequence in which they are expressed and can be abstract, sharing communication between the risk communicator and the target audience, and as well as information from the target audience to the communicative organizations. So, the common examples of pitfalls are threats, judging, blaming, and also the cutoff. So, ways to avoid pitfalls. So, first we have familiarize. So, you need to be familiar with the pitfalls ahead of time. Knowing what not to do will help you to avoid doing it. So, second is, take a time out. So, it's okay to pause and refocus to the conversation. You need to decide to focus on the issue and not on your former spouse's behavior. So, next is stop, acknowledge, and apologize. So, if you fall into communication pitfall, stop, acknowledge, and apologize is a must. So, it's not too late to recover and get back on track. You need to move forward by refocusing the conversation on the issues. So, next is express. So, if you find yourself on the receiving end of this behavior, let them know what is happening for you and what you need to continue the conversation. So, information people want. So, people want to know about a particular risk seems to vary depending on several factors, including their familiarity with the risk and the expectation for the method being used. So, here, you should know what people want. Kasi there are people na gustong makuha ang sapat na mga impormasyon about risk at meron din mga tao na ayaw. So, kumbaga, when it comes to research, people with higher levels of education wanted to know how research on risk was conducted. However, those people with lower education were interested only in the result of that research. So, ganun yun. So, next is mental models. So, mental models approach can be used to create precise risk models, messages, This method is best suited for the planning phase of crisis communication as well as for the care and consensus communication. So, in this will guide you or your perception and behavior. So, they are the thinking tools that you use to understand life, for making decisions, and also to solve problems. Learning new mental models give you a new way to see the world. So, for example, you learning a new mathematical method. So, mental models are imperfect, but it is useful. So, next is message mapping and message developing templates. It is a scientifically based approach for defining an organization's fundamental assertion and combining those statements into a framework that can be used to hide all public discussions such as media interviews, speeches, presentations, and as well as printed and electronic collateral. So, message map should be created with interested and affected parties. So, it's include here the scientists, communication specialists, and policy experts as applicable. So here, a large number of people will be involved. Each key message should have up to 3 supporting facts associated with it. To it help this to reduce confusion and increase comprehension and retention. Next is health risk communication. So through health communications, frequently incorporate persuasion elements. They should still be founded on understanding of the audience's issues, needs, and goals as well as incentives to behave. So understanding what your audience wants to know and crafting a set of message is preferable. Hindi ka lamang dapat nagre-rely sa single message. Kailangan lahat ng parties ay may address nila, lahat ng mga concerns nila para ma-achieve mo or nyo yung goals nyo. Next is crisis communication. So when it comes to crisis communication, the tone should convey a sense of urgency to act without confounding or upsetting people and reassuring them that answers are being sought. So messages used in crisis communication are meant to provide employees with the knowledge needed kung sakaling may crisis or emergency na maganap. So, there are common situations in which crisis communication is used, including product recalls, data breaches, workplace injuries, bankruptcies, and other workplace situations like sexual harassment. So, we have here the five pillars of successful crisis communication. So first, keep it simple. You must keep your crisis communication simple and easy to consume for everyone. When communicating in times of crisis, simplicity is the best, and also clarity is the key. You must ensure your message has a clear objectives, and make it relevant and tailored to your target audience. So, next is make it credible. Here, yung ikaw ba at yung mga crisis communication team mo ba ay meron bang credibility o ang mga audience ba ay pinagkakatiwalaan kayo? So here, this is where it's important to make sure na that your delivery matches your message. Ensure always present the evidence to support your message. So, next is show empathy. So, pagpapakita ng empathy during crisis ay mahalaga. The best way to show empathy to the people affected by the crisis is by active listening and encouraging bottom-up feedback. So, next is show competency. So, in time of crisis and change, highlighting your organization's competency is important. Meron ka bang skills, meron ka bang knowledge, resources, and people to follow through and get things done? Kung meron, then remind your people that you are ready to handle unprecedented situation. And last is make it share-worthy. So, make your crisis communication visual and share-worthy. Word of mouth will help spread your message and reach a wider audience. Encourage your people to share message internally and externally where relevant. So, determine the appropriate method. You need to decide how to communicate. Which method of communication will best meet both your purpose and objectives and your audience needs. So here, you should know what you are trying to communicate, why, and to whom you will sharing the risk communication.
Set a schedule. Planning a schedule is important to clarify the relationship between audiences, messages, channels, activities, and materials. Going through the communication planning process will help you identify who you need to reach, masabi kung ano yung mga gustong iparating sa mga tao, and how you will reach them. Without a schedule, the process of doing just about anything can become chaos. Legal requirements. Legal considerations are usually the first item that must be considered if the organization conducting the risk communication effort is to avoid litigation. Katulad 'di ba pag mag-a-apply ng trabaho is may mga requirements din na need para makapasa o hindi magkaroon ng sabit. Ganon din sa pagkakandak ng risk communication effort. Next one is organizational requirements. Every organization has plans and requirements that determine how it will progress into the future. So, mga examples ng organizational requirements na kailangan is vision, goals, objectives, and priorities. Performance plans, processes and requirements for quality assurance. Next is specific change initiatives, standards and protocols, confidentiality and security requirements. Yun yung mga example ng organizational requirements na need mong tignan. The scientific process. Your communication efforts will most likely have to coincide with certain aspect of the scientific process. Once a risk has been identified, you must alert those at risk, then follow up with more information as the assessment continues. So, those who are evaluating the risk may not be able to provide you with precise information. Dapat magkaroon ng schedule na nagpapakita kung anong mga hakbang ang magaganap sa mga araw kung kailan malalaman ang ilang information. As you plan your risk communication schedule, make sure you are aware of that schedule at sa mga pagbabago nito. Ongoing activities. Communication is an ongoing activity for any organization that serves, depends upon, or is in any way connected with the community. An essential part of any communication plan is continue using and revising your plan based on your experience throughout the existence of your organization. The next thing to consider is what else is going on in your organization, community, and country so that you can contextualize your risk communication efforts. What other types of information will your organization release at the same time you plan to release your risk communication information? Audience needs. An audience first needs to be aware of a risk and its relevancy to them before being willing to take any actions associated with the risk. So, if you are in a crisis situation, obviously, yung mga tao ay nangangailangan ng maraming at mahalagang impormasyon sa lalong madaling panahon. When you communicate, yung purpose mo ay hindi lang dapat yun yung gagawin. Instead, need mo din pakinggan yung mga opinions nila sa mga situation para yun nga, makinig sila sa'yo at magkaroon ng trust sa isa't isa. To communicate effectively, you must adapt to your audience. Therefore, you must know your audience. The next one is develop a communication plan. Studies are beginning to show that having a risk communication plan well integrated with the risk assessment effort can save time and money as well as increase the success of risk assessment and management process. Barantes 2009. So, developing a communication plan can help focus your message and reach your target audience. A plan can also influence the efficiency and simplicity of your communication method. Ang isang plano ay maaari ding makaimpluwensya sa kakayanan ng paraan ng pakikipagkomunikasyon. What to include in a communication plan? So, madami talaga yung dapat na ilagay sa communication plan, pero itong nasa PPT lang yung nilagay ko, nasa tingin ko is importante. So, una is purpose and approach. Think of this as a really clear summary of the entire communication plan. Why it's in place, the approach you're going to take, and how it connects to the rest of the project. Next is goals and objectives. This is where you start to drill down sa mga inaasahan kung ano ang pinaplano mong gawin. Next is stakeholder information. Kailangan din dito na alamin kung sino yung mga tao na need makipag-ugnayan sa isang communication plan. The type of information they need to receive, and their preferred method of communication. Next is tools. Dito mo sasagutin kung paano ka makikipag-ugnayan sa lahat sa iba't ibang mahalagang detalye. For examples is meeting summaries, formal presentations, and custom project dashboards are all option. Last is a high-level outline of internal project communication methods. While a communication plan mostly deals with people outside of your core team, it's still a good opportunity to outline the methods you'll be using for day-to-day communication. Developing risk communication strategies. A communication strategy is designed to help you and your organization communicate effectively and meet core organizational objectives. Putting a communication strategy into place allows employees to refer to a standards plan to interact with managers and clients. A communication strategy ensure that everyone involved ay may sapat na impormasyon to communicate about it. Maintaining consistency in the workplace and para maiwasan ang anumang kalabuan o misunderstanding. Storyboarding as a planning tool. Frioli 2000 defines a traditional description of storyboards as a visual reference depicting a particular scene or action, usually taken from a screenplay or some other form of written storyline. So, ginagamit ang mga storyboard bilang isang communication tool upang maiwasan ang mga pagkakamali dahil sa mga hindi inaasahang resulta. Storyboards can also be used to communicate with the broader audience in terms that anyone can understand. Storyboards can address complex concepts and process sa pamamagitan ng paggamit ng mga litrato at mga words, or text. Communication planning using the Comprehensive Environment Response, Compensation, and Liability Act or CERCLA approaches. Communication planning under CERCLA requires that those who are responsible for cleaning up a Superfund site interview member of the public and organization who might be interested in or are affected by the cleanup. Effective risk communication and community engage build and trust and often leads to better cleanup decisions that return sites to beneficial reuse as quickly as possible.
So the next part is putting risk communication into action. In this part, it discusses how to put action in risk communication using certain methods as information materials, visual representation of risk, face-to-face communication, working with media, the participation of the stakeholders, the social media, and especially the technologies.
Information materials. The written message in the form of information materials has long been a staple of the communication world. Informational material means any item which serves primarily to convey information. So when we say information materials, those are the tools or equipment that can use to convey information to the people. Some of examples of information materials are newsletters, posters, popular press magazines, newspapers, and technical reports. So those are the equipments that are mostly used in conveying information about risks. There's two specific advice about information materials with communicating risk. First is the constructing information materials. Whatever the form of the information material, those who are communicating risk must consider what information to include, how to organize messages, appropriate language, and the use of the narrative style. So, when we construct an information materials, we need to include some important information that are needed in written risk communication messages. The information that need to be included are the goals of the information material, nature of the risk, alternatives to the action that is causing the risk and any risk associated with these alternatives, uncertainties, how the risk will be managed, benefits of the risk, actions that the audience, contact point, glossary, helpful hints, index, and list of related information. We need also to consider on how we organizing material for information materials. Here, the way we organize our material will depend on the form of the information material and to our audience's needs. We need also to consider the language of information materials. Of course, the language we should use must depend on our audience, and we need to translate the information materials to become clear for our audiences. And lastly, we need also to consider the narrative style in information materials because audiences are become more interested if the form of risk information is through sharing personal story than sharing other data. So, number 2, guidelines for specific types of information materials. Information materials can range from the short 2-page fact sheet or quarter-page ad in a magazine to the multi-volume environmental impact statement. Some examples of guidelines for specific types of information materials that mostly used are newsletters. Newsletters are especially good for long-term projects for audience who are interested in the project or risk. The exact content of a newsletter will depend on the audience and the risk. Pamphlets, booklets, and fact sheets are good for short term, and this is one message communication effort or for covering one aspect of a different risk. Posters, advertisements, and displays are a form of information material geared to appeal to this visual orientation. These information materials should be in the language of the audience. The message should be simple and clear. And articles, this is written by someone knowledgeable about the risk, and it can be very effective in communicating risk to a variety of audiences. Here, we need to make sure that the publication's reader match your intended audience and always consider professional journals. And lastly is technical reports. Technical reports are very intimidating for many readers because it is needed by those who want to see more detailed data to form their own opinions. And in order to meet the needs of these segments of your audience, you need to organize the document from the back to the front. Visual representations of risks. Visuals have been shown to help people understand and remember content. Graeber 1990, Lang 1995, Shepard 1967. Because through visuals, it can help people to easily comprehend the content of something. For example, consumer comprehension of nutrition information on product label was improved when bar graphs and pie charts were used. Good visuals help audiences construct mental models of abstract or complex concepts. Graeber 1990. So here, it explains that as long as have a good visuals that is included in presenting this, people will easily understand its different concepts because having a good visuals will improve their comprehension and their problem solving. Ways on representing visual risk communication. Number 1. Design visuals for specific audiences and uses. In deciding which aspects of a risk to portray and how to present them, you will need to identify 3 things: what people want to know, what they need to know to make an informed decision, and how the visual information will be used. So here, when you are designing visuals for specific audiences and uses, of course, your priority is to analyze and define your audience's needs. Number 2, match the visual portrayal to the information to be conveyed. Not every type of risk or aspect of it lends itself to pictorial representation. Some common kinds of risk information that lend themselves to pictorial representation include the following: the nature of the risk and its effects, how large or significant the risk is, how likely the risk is to occur, and the chances that it will affect people. Here, sometimes the best approach in matching visual portrayal to the information to be conveyed is to show many aspects of the risk as soon as possible, giving more information in choices because it may be helpful to use several graphics to highlighting a certain aspect of the risk. Number 3. Pretest graphics with those who will use them. After you have researched your audience, identify the uses of your graphics, and prepared an initial set of graphics, the next step is to pretest them with people who represent your target audiences. Here, pretesting graphics is usually done as part of a broader evaluation of messages and or materials, which provides feedback on the graphic elements as well as other aspects of the message and presentations. Here, we focus on how to get the most out of pretesting for graphics, because when it comes to representing visuals about risk communication, we need to make sure that people will really use and apply those graphics. Therefore, we need to allow them to pretest in order for them to know on how to use it. Number 4, using visuals to personalize risk information. Visual displays can help personalize risk information. Photos are effective for realistically depicting visible risk characteristics that can affect individuals. Here, it explains that using visuals can personalize risk information in a way that every information that include in that representation of risk will imagine them that it can happen in real life. Number 5, Comparing risks in visual formats. Laypersons and experts often want to know how risks, especially unfamiliar ones, compare with a more common risk or with alternatives. So here it explained that visual is very effective because it can be used to compare magnitudes, effects, and alternatives on a common numeric scale. Number 6 is static versus interactive visuals. Another dimension of visual formats is representing there is information in an interactive or static format. So here it seems that using static or interactive format in processing, creating, changing, or completing a graphic would improve comprehension and decision making of the people more than just passively viewing the graphic. Number 7, depicting probability and uncertainty. Risk communicators often struggle with how to present two particular characteristics of risk. Probability, uncertainty, deaths, disease, or injuries can happen at various levels or under various conditions. Here, when we say probability, it is how likely the event is to occur, while uncertainty represents the factors about a hazards that are not completely known. So when it comes to presenting probability, an odds ratio often is used, while presenting uncertainty, risk assessment is non-exact and as such carries with these uncertainties. And when we sum up the probability and uncertainty, risk contain characteristic of both probability and uncertainty must be shown. Number 8, warning levels. Warning levels that include visual elements deserve special consideration. A robust body of research exists on the design of warning labels such as those for prescriptions, drugs, herbal remedies, and household chemicals. So here we need to educate ourselves about mandates regarding the use of graphics to convey warnings in order for the people become aware or updated to the possible situations that can caused by the risk. Number 9, consider using action levels. For crisis and care communication efforts where it is prudent to take a specific action, a graphic called a risk ladder has been shown to be effective in explaining risk and in recommending associated action levels. So here, we need to include an action standard with the risk because through this, people will follow some suggestions and recommendations that can benefit them. And lastly, ethical portrayal of risk information. Many risk communication experts feel that persuasive messages such as fear appeals are manipulated. Two of the most common faults that risk communicators should be aware of are using pictorial representations that are out of proportion to the actual numerical quantities represented, or especially when depicting increases or decreases. Number 2, using purely decorative design elements that obscure the meaning of data. So here, as a risk communicator, we should focus on several ethical factors when portraying the visual aspects of risk to avoid misunderstandings with your audiences, and can show also that you are really a professional when it comes to communicating risk by considering those ethical factors.
Face-to-face communication. Another way to communicate risk is face-to-face through some form of oral presentation. Face-to-face communication is when two or more people interact and communicate while visible to one another. Constructing face-to-face messages. Many people have learned about effective ways to speak or listen to their audiences in face-to-face interaction, perhaps through such organizations as the Toastmasters International. However, here in risk communication, kailangan din nating i-emphasize yung ibang point, and the key to these points ay kailangan nating mamili kung sino talaga yung magaling mag-lead in the said face-to-face interaction. Choose the appropriate spokesperson. Whether the audience will be doing most of the talking, as in an audience interview, or the organization speaker will be doing most of the talking. Those who are communicating risk have several choices as to who will lead the effort. Dito mayroon tayong two key criteria in choosing a spokesperson. First is audience acceptability. It means that the best spokesperson is one who is credible receptions to concerns and a believable speakers from the standpoint of the audience. The second one is organizational acceptability. It's important from the organizational perspective that does the person really understand the organization's rules and philosophy as well as the work that is being done in connection with the risk. Find the right person. Once you know what criteria your spokesperson must meet, you can find your spokesperson in a number of places. You can choose healthcare professionals, recognized experts in the field, either inside or outside your organizations, risk managers, line managers, public affairs staffs, or celebrities. Each group has its own benefits and liabilities. Give the audience something to take away. One of the drawbacks of face-to-face communication is that unless the members of your audience are good at taking notes, they will have nothing to take away from the presentations to help them remember key points. Even though some people learn by listening, more need visual reinforcement. Unless you reinforce the presentation with written materials, the audience may not take away or retain the informations you intended. Reinforce your message with visual aids. Whenever possible, including visual aids as part of the face-to-face interactions. This visual must be readable from the back of the room in grouping settings to underline crucial themes and show the audience how concepts to go together. Use words or short phrases to further demonstrate crucial concepts. Use images, drawings, and graphs. Speak in the language of the audience. The speaker should choose words and phrases that are easily understood by the audience. When at all possible, the speaker should communicate in the audience's native tongue. If English is not the major language of the audience, as it is in many Hispanic communities, for example, find a spokesperson who can communicate in the primarily language. Do not promise what you cannot deliver. When you as a speaker get a questions from your audience that you cannot answer, offer to get back to them with an answer only if you can realistically find that answer. I do not know but I'll find out is a good response to unfamiliar questions. Guidelines for specific types of face-to-face communication. Speaking engagements. Speaking engagements are one of the most common forms of face-to-face risk communication. Your credibility as a thought leader will grow and you'll be able to reach a wider audience with your message. Speakers bureaus. Instead of waiting to be asked to make presentations, many organizations in charge of risk communications efforts have developed a speakers bureau, a group of speakers known for their expertise in a given subject who can be contacted to give free or low-cost speeches for local communities and organizations. When we say speakers bureau, we're referring to a resource for meeting planners, convention planners, conference planners, and other event planners. Tours and demonstrations. It is other way to communicate risk in face-to-face interactions. Some members of the audience are asked to observe a facility or place that is thought to be contributing to a danger during a tour. The audience watches or participates in activity aimed to analyze, prevent, monitor, or minimize a risk during a demonstrations. Video presentations. Video combines many of the features of information materials and face-to-face communication. It can be used in a range of settings, including official learning contexts as well as at-home study. One other factors to consider in video productions particularly is the quality of the video. Audience interviews. Interviewing the audience to understand their concerns and perceptions can be an effective form of face-to-face interactions in that it provides those who are communicating risk the opportunity to better understand their audience. And it provides the audience with the opportunity to share their concerns. Audience interview can be particularly effective approach to start the process of reaching a consensus. An audience interview is similar to a survey, except the questions should be portrayed to the audience more ambiguous. Information fairs. An information fairs is a grouping of tables or booths staffed by organizations charged with communicating a particular risk or set of risks. Those interested in the risk can walk around the fair and talk to or pick up with information from various organizations that they are interested in. It can also be used to initiate consensus, a communication attempt by providing information. Training. The occupational Safety and Health Act requires that employees be trained in the use of hazardous materials associated with their jobs. Training can also be used to educate principals about different types of risk and to establish a crisis response team. Next topic is working with the news media. Television, newspapers, radio, magazines, and the internet, all of which are accessible to huge sectors of the population, are perhaps the most important sources of information in today's culture because of the unique and significant role that media representatives, reporters, journalists, editors, and producers play in disseminating risk information to the public. We have dedicated a chapter to dealing with them. The roles of the news media in risk communication. Media organizations such as television producers and newspapers can choose among several rules or levels of participation to address a given risk-related issues such as reporting existing information, influencing the way an issue is portrayed, independently bringing an issue to the public's attention or restricting its coverage, and proposing solutions to a risk-related decision such as taking a stand on an issue. It is critical to grow on all levels and keep good working ties with representatives for the media. News media constructed with other stakeholders. Media representatives differ from other stakeholders in two ways that limit their involvement. The first mission takes priority over involvement in a given risk-related issue, while the second features that sets media representatives apart from other stakeholders is their position and representations. Next is productive interaction, not polarization. Regardless of the media's level of involvement, agreeing on how risk should be portrayed can be challenging. The news media's ability to influence financial bottom lines has been discovered by entire sectors. Working with reporters and journalists effective can result in a more informed, empowered, and solution-oriented public. Understanding cultural differences. The issue was that the researcher approached the interview as if it were a casual conversation with one of his peers. Risk communicators can work more effectively with reporters and journalists if they understand the culture differences distinction. The news media are event focused. Reporters, especially when covering the news, are largely reactive, reporting on the facts surrounding an event or ongoing risk. Due to a lack of technical staff, experience, and space and time limits, the media may place a low priority on discussing the possibility of the danger occurring under various conditions. Broader societal or policy concerns surrounding the risk or other contextual information. Certain kinds of risk get more coverage. Risks are not covered in the news media commensurate with their probability of occurrence. People discussing risk in a crisis situation may find it relatively easy to gain media attention, whereas those communicating risk in a care or consensus situation may find it more difficult to reach their audience through media forums. Journalistic independence and deadlines affect content. Many technical professionals view the news media as a conduit or pipeline responsible for transporting technical information to the public. That's what Nelkin 1994 said. Deadlines are another reason for the lack of source review. They expect to control the flow of information to the public just as they do within their own domains, and they feel betrayed when their views are questioned when they use the media to achieve their own interest. The need for balance invites opposing views. Many accusations of inaccuracy follow less from actual errors than from efforts to present complex materials about risk in a readable and appealing style. That was Dorothy Nelkin 1994 said. This attempt at balance can sometimes unintentionally result in imbalance. A noisy self-proclaimed experts or media Special interest groups' viewpoint can be made to appear just as valid as that of a peer review body of experts or even a worldwide scientific consensus. Information is condensed, simplified, and personalized. In today's information glutted world, media stories must grab and keep the audience's attention. When it comes to describing risk, journalists consider their job as informing people about potential threats and suggesting possible responses. These methods of compressing, simplifying, and personalizing data may make data more accessible to the general public, but they may also result in inadequate and sometimes unbalanced data for making personal risk decisions. Guidelines for interacting with the news media. Understanding the differences between risk experts and media professionals is the first step in effective interaction. We don't want to imply that the two groups are incompatible. It is feasible to locate areas where the two cultures' interests intersect, enabling a mutually beneficial working partnership to successfully interact with media. Develop relationships with local and regional news media representatives. Journalists need information and ideas for stories that have importance for the local community. Risk communicators should see themselves as resources that can help journalists do their jobs better. Demonstrating your want to serve, the greatest method to create a long-term connections with reporters is to act as a source of information rather than to satisfy your own self-interest. The idea is to establish a reputation as a knowledgeable, trustworthy source on one or more issues so that you will be sought out in the future. Know when to approach media representatives or when they may approach you. When there is a potential for immediate public health or environmental risk, it is necessary to contact media representatives without delay so that people can be informed about how to avoid or reduce the risk. Organizations that may encounter such crisis communication scenarios should create media practices ahead of time, including the use of qualified spokesmen. The goal of establishing media guidelines for potential crises is not to minimize the danger situations or assign blame, but to notify people as fast as feasible to hazard when it comes to disseminating information to help the public through the media. Timing and accuracy are crucial. Prepare messages and materials carefully. Planning is critical for successful media interactions. When preparing to speak with a reporter, be aware of the questions that may be asked and plan ahead of time how you will react. Consider what the audience most needs to know and is most concerned about while crafting these messages. Even if you aren't asked questions that directly relate to these topics, find ways to bridge the conversation to them. Evaluate news media coverage. Regardless of how you engage with the news media, if you are including media coverage as part of your risk communication efforts, be sure to evaluate its usefulness. You should concentrate on the media and your partners' interactions that are more focused on the main message. If you see that the news media has added a new slant to the story that you weren't expecting, you might want to take advantage of it by reaching out to other media outlets that specialize in that issue, such as trade journals. Using technology. Organizations are increasingly using the internet and other technology tools to make their interactions with reporters faster and more efficient. It also has a password-protected online media briefing center for accredited journalists that provides embargoed news information that has been requested not to be reported until a specific time. Distribution services. Many organizations distribute their news release using subscription-based web services that make news available to journalists. Many of these services are in the science and technology domains for risk-related news. Email lists are used by many organizations to deliver their news releases on a regular basis to contact a person as well as the organization's website address. Video and audio news releases. Video and audio news releases provide broadcast-ready information. The news releases are frequently shown on commercial television stations as well as nationally syndicated shows targeting rural population. The center also makes its press releases available to the public on its website as streaming media files. Public Service Announcement. PSAs are advertisements that serve the public interest. PSAs aim to change attitudes and behaviors and bring about good social change by educating and raising awareness about important social issues. The most popular media venues of these are television and radio, but newspapers and magazines and online may also accept PSAs. Telebriefings use a conference call format that replaces or augments the traditional press conference. The telebriefing is sometimes broadcast over the internet as streaming audio. Pwedeng ganapin ang telebriefing kahit saan, similar to a conference call, and they do not require participants na mag-travel pa para lamang makapunta sa location noong conference na yon. And last is social media. In two crucial ways, the rise of social media is impacting how journalists report on risk and other themes. To begin with, journalists are presenting their news via more social media platforms, which allows them to reach a wider range of niche audience. Second, journalists are leveraging social media to generate story ideas and develop them. Dapat doon tayo makisali sa sariling social media platform ng mga journalists para magkaroon tayo ng sapat na kaalaman sa mga tunay nilang pinopoint out na issue. This might also assist us in directing our story ideas to the right journalist.
Stakeholders participation. What are risk stakeholders? Risk stakeholders are people who are or perceive themselves to be affected by a decision, treatment, strategy, or process. Stakeholders can be individual, an organization, or a grouping within an organization, such as the management, who may change at any time during the process. Some risk stakeholders may remain constant, which others may come and go. So, the role of the stakeholders' primary role is to help a company meet its strategic objectives by contributing their experience and perspective to a project. They can also provide necessary materials and resources. So, what are risk stakeholders like? So, risk stakeholders are like a character in a story that may be affected by storyline. They may have something to say as part of the storyline. They may play a special part in shaping the storyline, or they may be background characters who the storyline may affect directly without them having the chance to express an opinion. Anyone who may be affected by an occurrence in a risk stakeholder, whether they are directly involved or not. Stakeholder engagement is an important part of planning for emergency and disaster. So, in short, ang stakeholders pala ay may malaking ambag o isang member na may malaking ambag na kung saan kaya niyang nagbubuo siya ng isang decision making, nagbibigay din siya ng strategy about sa kanyang experience, and then nagbibigay din siya ng plano about sa mga emergencies, disaster. Sabi nga dito, para ang stakeholders daw ay Parang katulad ng karakter sa isang story na siya yung bida. For example, there are 3 ways you can involve stakeholders. First, informing. You will inform stakeholders about the project. You will tell them useful bits of information. This is one-way communication where people outside of the project team are learning details of the project. Examples include reporting to funders or the progress of the project, explaining to residents of the site the operational plan, how they will be affected, and what they need to do, making completed project documents, feasibility study report, project plan, available for public reading, TV, radio announcements, newspaper article. So, isa din palang trabaho ng stakeholders yung pag-inform sa atin ng project nila, kung ano ba ng kalagayan, kung anong operational plan ba yung gagawin nila, and kung saan nila ipaparating, kung anong gagamitin nilang strategy na ipaparating yung isang announcement. Kung newspaper ba yan na article, public reading ba yan, TV or radio. Number 2 is consulting. You will consult with the stakeholders. This is a two-way discussion where you will give the stakeholders the opportunity to contribute ideas, suggestions, and opinions in the planning and decision making parts of the project. Introducing ideas early and giving people time to consider proposal is important. So, meron din pala itong nagko-consult din pala sila or nagkakandak din pala sila ng isang opinions or suggestion, ideas itong mga stakeholders na kung saan na may di-discuss, for example, nag-discuss siya sa isang community, itong stakeholders. Ngayon, meron naman siyang tatanungin na isang tao or mga audience na mag-share ng isang opinions, suggestions, or decision making na alam nilang ma-adapt nila na mayroong maitutulong o mayroong maidudulot na maganda. And then third one is participating. Some stakeholders will participate in the project work. Community groups, visitors, and other stakeholders can all make a direct contribution to the project effort. For example, local residents often make up part of the operation team, and all visitors need to undertake biosecurity actions when visiting the project site. So, ito na nga. Pag once naman na pumunta ang isang stakeholders or member ng stakeholders sa isang community, dito naman nakikipag-participate yung mga tao or mga audience. For example, pag may pupunta sa isang barangay, i-assist nila ng mga barangay officials, captains, ganyan. And tutulong pa sila na masiayos or gagawa ng isang actions sa isang undertake biosecurity actions when visiting the project site, parang ganon. What is the purpose of engaging with risk stakeholders? It is important that risk stakeholders are engaged with so that they can be made aware of potential outcomes, and if necessary, they may want to express their opinion on a risk, action, or outcome. Engaging with the wide variety of risk stakeholders can also allow different voices to be heard. Different people can offer different perspective and expertise on an issue. So, importante talaga ang stakeholders na ma-engage tayo sa kanila. Bakit? For example, meron isang situation na involving exposure to danger. Parang ganon. Disaster o trahedya. Malalaman mo yung mga dapat mong gawin. For example, lumilindol. Alam mo kung anong dapat mong gawin kasi na-orient ka nila. Aware ka sa mga yan dahil nakinig ka sa mga binigay nilang information. And then meron din, kailangan mong mag-engage sa kanila, mailapit sa kanila, para full information ka, full load information ka, parang ganon. And then, alam mo yung gagawin mo nga, sabi ko, sa isang bagay o sa isang issue. And then, kaya nga sila kumukuha din ng opinion natin para yung mga, kasi hindi naman nila alam lahat, though napag-aralan naman nila lahat, pero kailangan pa nila ng isang real situation na na-experience mo na kailangan nilang ma-adapt, na maitutulong, na makakatulong sa kanila. What are the roles and responsibility of risk stakeholders? They have a variety of roles. First, understanding. Risk stakeholders should strive to understand the risks which are being discussed. So, kailangan talagang paglaanan nila ng effort itong mga stakeholders na masalo nilang ipaintindi or ipaintindi sa mga audience nila, sa target nila o sa isang community, na kailangan talaga nilang mas talong aralin ng mabuti bago nila i-share sa ibang tao. And then second is informing. Risk stakeholders may be required to provide specialist information to an organization. So, for example, pumunta sila ang stakeholders sa isang community o sa isang barangay. Kailangan talaga na required na mag-provide ng isang specialist or good speaker na kung saan masalong maihikayat kung masalo nilang may didiscuss ng maigi, and then masalo nilang makukuha yung atensyon ng isang tao na explain yung ganto, na masalo silang makinig sa kanya kasi magaling yung speaker na yon. And then identifying. Risk stakeholders may help to identify risk. So ang stakeholder din, ang may tutulong din naman sa atin is kung paano niya maitutulong is kung paano niya maibibigay yung isang impormasyon kung anong risk yon, kung anong disaster yung dumaan na yon. Kung lindol ba yan, or volcanic eruption, parang ganyan. And then, providing. Some stakeholders may be expected to provide the necessary resources for the chosen action plan. So, yung mga stakeholders, expected na nila na dapat merong nakaprovide na mga equipments, resources, na for example, na may isang trahedya o may isang risk na dumating sa isang barangay o isang bayan, dapat makaredy na lahat yung mga resources nila. And then, second is training. If an action plan requires education of staff or customers, someone must carry out the training. Malamang sa malamang, pupunta kayo sa isang field na hindi mo alam. So, ikaw din lang mapapahamak. Mapapahamak din yung isang taong i-rescue mo. So, kailangan, bago ka mapunta sa isang maging member ng stakeholders, kailangan mo munang, kung required talagang pag-aralan, kailangan mong pag-aaralan para mas ready ka sa field mo. And then, last one is communicating. Information may need to be widely spread as part of the risk management process. So, kailangan mo talagang yung isang information, kailangan mo talagang i-spread sa buong community o sa buong mundo o sa isang nasasakupan mo, no, kung saan ka na talaga, kailangan mong may share lahat sa isang nation o sa buong Pilipinas ka muna para mas lalo silang informed.
So now, let's talk about technology-assisted communication. We all know that technology gives us almost unlimited options for risk communication. And here in technology, we have websites, telebriefing, streaming audio and video, data gathering and measurement devices, online virtual worlds, and electronic forms. And now let's talk about the usage of these technology apps. So first we have websites. So websites raise risk awareness and provide options to mitigate risk. Next, telebriefings, streaming audio and video. It convey risk information quickly to media outlets and consumers. Next, we have data gathering and measuring devices. So it upload content to reveal risk information for decision making. Next, we have online virtual worlds. So these through technology apps, users practice their skills in emergency response scenarios and other risk-related activities. Lastly, we have electronic forums. So it invites stakeholders to comment on risk decisions, computer models, help them calculate their own risk, and group software aids decision-making process. Pero syempre, itong mga technology applications, hindi naman siya palaging superior sa ibang forms of communication. Because in fact, they can be less useful and more expensive. So kung there is an advantages, of course, there will be always a disadvantages. So next, let's talk about some of the advices on how to use these technology applications when communicating risk. So first, we have technology in care communication. So of course, many publications give guidelines and standards for properly preparing information to be viewed on the internet. So when designing websites to communicate, a few points should be emphasized. So we have here, first, establish your organization's credibility. So dito, makikita yung about section of your website by describing your organization, kung ano yung role nito, and of course, its accountability. Next, we have put your risk information in context and qualify it. So, kailangan make sure natin dito na lahat yung downloadable papers, presentations, and yung ibang information include publication dates, and kailangan traceable back siya to their sources. Next, we have be ethical. So, dito kailangan naka-explain yung privacy and confidentiality ng mga personal information na nakolekta mo para maprotektahan yung mga ito. Next, we have collaborate with credible others. So, dito, pinoprovide yung mga links na related sa mga regulatory agencies, environmental or civic groups, universities, and other such sites. Next, lastly, we have conduct usability testing. So, dito, kino-consider natin yung language na marirelate lahat ng mga audience. So, kailangan din yung mga graphics and yung mga downloadable files ay mabilis at easy to access lang siya. And kailangan din na yung mga sites structure, navigation, and search function ay clearly and logically organized. So next, let's talk about technology in consensus communication. Okay, so computer technology can be used effectively in risk communication that involves groups or individuals in a decision-making process. So now let's summarize some of the most common tools and guidelines for each. So we have here websites, the LAN, or the local area networks, extranets, and bulletin boards. We have tracking and analyzing comments and responses. And lastly, we have facilitating group decision making. So here in websites, itong type ng application, napaka-effective siya in consensus communication because napaka-accessible siya kahit saang location ka, ma'am. Pwede sa bahay, in your work, in school, or in other settings. And then we have the local area networks, extranets, and bulletin boards. So it enables electronic communication among users within an organization or area, such as a neighborhood. Extranets can be set up to maintain security for sensitive or proprietary company information. So electronic bulletin boards are a good way to get the current pulse on an issue. Next, we have tracking and analyzing comments and responses. So, ito yung key feature of this system sa risk communication standpoint. Because it can both track and analyze the comments and individuals' commenters. So, dito natin makikita na kung gaano yung mga comment ay related sa decision and sa final resolutions. Next, we have facilitating group decision making. So, Studies show that situations in which a group must reach consensus work best when computer-mediated communication is combined with, face-to-face interaction.
So, social media. Social media can be a valuable component of risk communication. Not only does it more distribution channels, but it also gives organizations almost instant and continuous feedback on what people want to know about risk and what they are concerned about. So, social media allows individuals to connect with each other online and to share information, videos, photos, and comment using easy to publish tools. So, the resulting visible discussion can include both negative and positive experiences with a particular problem in real time. So, next is determining audience for social media. The needs for the audience is important for any type of risk communication. Social media possesses in a unique situation for the audience participates in contents development and message transmission. So, determining your audience is very important kasi malalaman mo dito kung ano nga ba yung content na maaari mong gawin o i-release sa social media. Malalaman mo rin dito kung ano nga ba, sino-sino nga ba yung mga target audience mo. Next is organizational barriers for social media adoption. So, first, lack of time and ability. So, for social media, partnering with the volunteers or other organizations can be the key, particularly for crisis communications, where such partners may not be as overwhelmed in an emergency. Next, inability to understand the tools. So, siguro ang halimbawa dito is yung mga matatanda na walang kakayahan na or hindi gaanong alam ang paggamit ng mga technologies yan, di ba? Kaya isa sa mga barriers na maaring ma-encounter sa social media adoption. Culture of organization. So, social media activity should also be part of the organization's overall risk communication plan with the similar safeguards of information and a focus of audience needs. Next is concern about tarnishing the organization's image. So here, one manner to reduce this subject is to increase the recommendation or the rules for social media participation. Next is potential to perpetuate misinformation. So another concern about crowdsourcing and audience interaction is the potential for misinformation and rumor to spread. So these findings point to one of the best way to prevent misinformation from spreading is be the one to share the correct information. So kumbaga, isa ka dapat sa magbahagi ng mga tamang impormasyon para hindi na mas lalong kumalat ang mga fake news, ganyan. Next is information security. Many organizations worry that in the highly interactive environment of social media, participants could deliberately or inadvertently reveal information that should be kept secure or appropriately. So, dito is, kadalasan hindi, mga kailangan dapat hindi sabihin is na ibabahagi sa iba. So, ang kinakailan dito, the organization must develop strategies to balance the risk against the benefit of social media. Next, sharing content via social media. So, sharing content is the closest social media practice to more traditional forms of risk communication, but even here, engagement is the key. Ang maano ko dito is yung vlogging. Kasi dito is malalaman mo yung makapagbahagi ka ng content na applicable or yung nararapat sa mga audience mo at makakatulong ito para mas maging aware yung mga audience sa mga maaaring gawin or yung mga information na dapat malaman nila kung sakaling may mga emergency na maganap. So next is engagement with stakeholders. So social media makes it easier than ever to connect with stakeholders on risk. Where to attend public meetings, the things may be sparse. Owners have less trouble posting comments online from home and in some cases is more convenient. So ito is you need to kailangan ma-engage ang mga stakeholders para pagkatiwalaan ka nila, di ba? para mapagbigay ka ng mga impormasyon na maaari nilang magamit or magamit kung sakaling sa panahon ng risk, ganyan. Kasi mas madali ring ma-communicate sa mga tao gamit ang mga social media. So 7 is monitoring changes in perception via social media. Monitoring changes in perception can be as simple as noting friends in comment on content over time as elaborate as using computer-based tools to analyze contents and run reports. So when audience analysis required labor and resources for interviews. Kasi 'di ba, kailangan mo talagang gumastos para malaman kung ano na nga ba yung mga perception na ng mga tao. Kailangan mo ng research para malaman kung ano na yung mga perspective nila at ma-monitor mo yon gamit ang social media. So next is social media networking sites. Social media networking sites remain one of the most heavily used types of social media. Users of social media and networking sites have pages that list their interests, personal information they care to share, and the ability to send short posts on what they are currently doing. So siguro dito is yung siguro mga page, tsaka yung sa Google, yung mga sites doon, di ba? Dito, kahit i-search lang ng mga audience yon is makukuha na nila information na nais nilang makuha, di ba? Nakaayos na kasi doon eh. Kung ano nga ba yung interest nila or yung mga questions sa utak nila na kailangan nilang malaman, ganyan. Dito rin nakalagay din yung mga updates na parang mga balita na maaring maging aware or maging inform yung mga tao. So, next is microblogging. Microblogging shares tiny snippets of information, often 140 characters or less, among users who have chosen to connect as friends, family, professional, colleges, or fans of a particular activity. So, with the microblogging, you can share short messages with an online audience to improve engagement. So, dito siguro, example ko dito is yung mga Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, ganyan. So, dito, makapagbigay ka rin ng information at makakakalap ka rin ng mga information mula sa mga friends mo or sa family mo, ganyan. Kahit sa mga short messages lang. Magiging aware ka at magiging aware din ng mga tao. Kaya isa to sa mga mabisang paraan sa pagbahagi ng risk communication. So, next is blogging and podcast. Blogs are online commentaries that shares the opinions of their creators and those who wants to respond. They range of personal journals to sophisticated publications with readership level at or above the level mainstream media. Blogs cover any topic with which people have deep expertise and a desire to express it. Blogging and podcast is example din dito is YouTube kasi nagre-record ka eh. Nandito may audio, mas may ma-express mo yung sarili mo, mas ma-express mo yung nais mong sabihin sa mga audience mo. At syempre, makakalap ka rin ng mga opinions and thoughts nila na maaring maging content mo rin. Kung sakali, like for example sa mga vloggers, comment down below kung ano ang mga pwedeng gawin sa ganito, ganyan. So, isa to sa mga best way sa risk communication. Kasi balikat ng information at balikan ng mga thoughts and ideas. So, next is mapping. Maps have proven especially useful for crisis communications, easily showing the spread of the risk, safe evacuation routes, and the shelter location. So, ito is makakatulong din nga sa risk communication. Kasi, di ba, ang mapping is pwede mong ituro yung mga maaring safe na lugar sa mga tao kung sakaling may dumating na emergency or risk. Ganyan. So, for example na lang dito is yung Waze, di ba? May mga drivers na gumagamit nila kung sakaling hindi na nila alam kung saan sila dadaan or kung naliligaw na sila. Kaya malaking tulong din ang mapping. So next is mobile phones. Mobile phones has become an important way to communicate risk information, particularly in crisis situations. To share information over mobile phones, keep information short and optimized for a smaller screen. So, mobile phone is, andyan na lahat yan. Kaya, ito makakatulong din when it comes to risk communication. Makakapag-update ka, lalo na sa friends and families mo, gamit yung mobile phones mo. Kung sakaling may load ka or pwede, kung wala ka namang, diba, kung wala kang pang message o wala kang pang tawag, pwede ikaw naman yung update ng, ng family or friends mo. So, makakatulong din ang mobile phone when it comes to risk communication. And that's all. Thank you.